So before we get into today's stream, I want to share something with you guys, and this is kind of weird. So I don't know if you guys, I mean, I studied health, right? I studied kinesiology in university, and I'm a phys ed teacher, fitness trainer. I've worked in sport quite a bit. There's a trend in Canada right now on Twitter. I know it's Twitter, so I mean, take that as you will. But there's a thing that came out here, and this is for the Canadian Obesity Guidelines, promoting a shift away from focusing on calories and weight. And I found this a very interesting read. Hey, Coma, how you doing, man? I found this a very interesting read because new guidelines call for fundamental shift in obesity treatment. Obviously, obesity is a big problem in the world, right? Lots of people are obese, clinically obese, right? And it's a big issue. Sorry, but it's a big issue that people have to deal with because a lot of it is caused by a culture that promotes, encourages, celebrates sedentarism, sedentary behaviors, poor diet, exercise as an afterthought, stuff like this, right? A lot of sit-down activities and jobs that don't give people proper exercise at work. I remember a lot of people in chat were actually talking about when they were going through all the new guidelines, talking about how they're going to try and enhance occupational kinesiology, which is what I studied, which is super cool, like learning how to get people active at the workplace no matter what job they're doing. There's a big talk about a year ago for us. We were talking about it all the time at work, and even like one of our mods here, Officer, he was talking about how like they have weekly stretches or daily stretches, I believe, at work. That's super cool, right? We need that type of stuff. So what happened here is the guidelines haven't been updated since 2006. Now, if I remember correctly, back in 2017, which this is really weird, in 2017, we updated the phys ed curriculum for elementary and high school, which got a ton of pushback, especially on the sex ed side of things, because, you know, we're not even going to get into that topic. I could talk forever on this. But when we updated in 2017, our curriculum was from 1997, before the age of cyberbullying becoming a real big thing that people were talking about, cyber safety, healthy relationship conversations, because back then you didn't talk about boys and girls or boys and girls and people who don't identify as either getting together, because that's what we did in school. It was shit. You're right. So these guidelines haven't been updated since 2006. It's 14 years later. These take a while, which is kind of weird because I understand it takes a lot of research and stuff like this, but I'd like to point out, and I'm going to explain why this kind of like churns my butter in terms of why this is weird. So, basically they're calling on 3 pillars of effective long-term weight loss, right? And obviously, and we've talked about this before on stream when people ask fitness advice, most people say, yeah, diet and exercise is great for you. What does diet mean? Diet just means eating. It doesn't actually mean like reducing calories. Diet just means what you eat, right? Diet is not actually a thing. Like when people say I'm going on a diet, cool, you've been on a diet all your life. You're just changing your shift. You're shifting your diet, and changing that kind of language actually influences the way people think about the way they eat and exercise, right? So your exercise regimen does exist if you sit down all day. It's non-existent, right? You're doing jack shit. So your exercise regimen is walking to the fridge, walking to the bathroom, walking wherever you gotta go, walking to your car, walking to and from the parking lot. That's your exercise regimen, right? Similar to your diet, which could be like 3 bags of Cheetos and a pack of 2-4, right? That does exist, by the way. I know a guy. But the point is, like, diet and exercise has always been like the pillar they've always gone, but they haven't really referred to cognitive therapy, right? They're also talking about looking into epidemiology and looking into behavioral factors and looking into other forces, external forces beyond your diet and exercise to determine what could be the cause of your obesity. Now, obviously, obesity is the excess of fat in a body. To keep it super simple, right? Your adiposity, which is your fat content, is too high, right? Obviously, this is really bad because it chokes your arteries, it chokes your organs, it's over-insulation, you keep storing more energy. I'm sure you may or may not have heard this, but the more energy you store, the more you're going to try and store. Hey, Barty, good to see you, man. But the more that you eat, right, your cells expand, and when your cells expand, when your fat cells expand, they actually multiply. So for me, when I gained a lot of weight from my medication for my anxiety, Like, imagine, I'm going to use arbitrary numbers here, right? Let's say I have 3 million fat cells, or 1 million fat cells, right? So, when you overeat, when you consume a lot of shit, sugar, fat, all this stuff, right? I'm not a nutritionist. But when you consume a lot of bad stuff for you, right? What ends up happening is your cells grow to the point where they can't grow anymore, and then they multiply. So, obese people are people who are gaining or increasing in fat percentage, right? Fat to non-fat percentage in your body. Your cells actually multiply. So when 1 million fat cells were hungry and needed to be fed, now you have 2 million fat cells that need to be fed. And the worst part about it is, without using something like surgery, like liposuction and stuff like that, well, liposuction is exterior, but like without taking out the fat cells, what ends up happening is when you lose weight or when you lose fat body percentage, because we hate talking about losing weight, when you lose body fat percentage, the cells merely shrink. They don't go away. So, when you have 3 kids, right, you have to feed 3 mouths. If you have a 4th kid, and that kid becomes older in your house, like when those 3 kids become older, you have a 4th kid, right? Those 3 kids don't stop needing food. They still need to be fed on top of the 4th kid, right? So imagine it like that. So even though you shrunk 2 million fat cells, those 2 million fat cells are still hungry. They still want to be fed the stuff that we crave. Fat, sugar, sweetness, that type of stuff, right? The sugar is sweetness. The point is, saltiness. Like, it wants those types of things. That's what our tongue is used to. That's what we crave as humans. It's what we use to survive for so long, right? So, the more you gain, the more you get hungry, and it perpetuates this cycle. Now, one good thing about exercise and restricting and modifying the way that you do diet is it's a mental thing to help you get over that, right? So, I was overweight for multiple years, right? I had to be, because one, I was injured, right? I cannot do anything physically to keep my weight down. You guys remember me like a year ago, right? Even 2 years ago, where my face was like super puffy and I had a lot more weight on me. Right now, I've normalized out. Yes, I've been still having issues with my pain and stuff like that, but I've been able to reduce the amount of body fat that I have, right? So now I am still really hungry because I have those fat cells. Now, I don't know enough about the science to go deeper into that. It was the way that it was explained to me when I was in school 5 years ago, right? So, essentially what they always taught us was if you keep your fat percentage down, if you keep the number of fat cells down, or if you just keep your fat percentage down all the time, you're not going to run into this issue where it could perpetuate, right? It's a cycle. The more you eat, the bigger you get, the bigger you are, the more energy you need to fuel your body. The more you eat, chances are your diet is not necessarily the greatest, unless you have something special like you're a bodybuilder or stuff like this. That's completely out of my realm. But generally speaking, if we're talking about someone who is overweight, obese, stuff like this, chances are your exercise is not the absolute greatest. If it is good, but what you're eating is crap, and 8% of you now is we used to say 80% exercise, 20% diet. It's now 80% diet, 20% exercise, because if it's not in you, you're not affected by it. It's true, right? If I don't eat cyanide, I'm not poisoned. It's the same thing. If I don't eat empty calories or if I don't eat high-fat foods, high-fat meat, it's not in me, so it will not affect me. So, if you're used to that type of cycle, you start eating more and more and more of it, you're gaining more weight, you're gaining more fat percentage, and then as you're gaining more fat percentage, you're eating more because you're feeding your body because it needs to keep up, right? That's why it spirals out of control for a lot of people who do not have the background to understand how to modify their diet and their exercise, but furthermore to also look into the reasons, right? If you're someone who eats a lot of junk food, and then you look at them as a doctor and go, well, you just need to stop eating junk food, there's very little looks, or there's very little requirement for them to take a look into, maybe you have high stress levels, maybe you're stress eating, right? I've had a couple of friends go to doctors because they need to have their weight managed, right? So, what's interesting is the doctors would just say, yeah, we're going to get you into a gym, we're going to get you to eat less calories, right? Calories are not the only thing anymore. You have to look into sugar, fat intake. You have to look into what type of nutrients are they getting, which promotes metabolism, right? When are they eating? Like, what times of days we eat? And we do this as fitness trainers, right? We look at this stuff, right? I'm not trained in nutrition, so I can only do the absolute basics and kind of like fundamentals, look up on Google type of basics of nutrition. And I do that. And now, it's basically being said in Canada. Also, I didn't know this, that obesity is not officially recognized as a chronic disease by any level in the government of Canada. I didn't know that is a disease. There's a lot of issues with it, right? it's not one you're going to spread to other people. It's not an infection, right? But it is a problem because it has psychological, societal, right? They mentioned there's a lot of fat shaming, right? There's a lot of, oh, you're big, you must be real shit at exercise type of shaming, right? And it's very interesting that they only are now recognizing this in their things in 2020. I know, that's the weird thing, but when we're in the US, it is, right? So it struck me, because I'm not upset, it's just, I'm not surprised either, because this is the thing for me, right? Especially after last week's rant. I'm just kind of looking at this going, okay, we've done this for multiple years, but I know that a lot of doctors that I've seen, right, or if they make mention of weight, because they don't look at fat percentage, because they don't have the tools for it, right? It's just fascinating to me that a lot of times when I've heard my friends go through fitness or go through with doctors and stuff like that the doctors said the same thing, right? Diet and exercise. And that's what your parents say, diet and exercise. What your grandparents say, diet and exercise. We haven't changed the fundamental way in which people view that obesity can be for many things. It could be genetic, right? Like, the worst thing is, I think, especially for women, and we talk about this a lot in sex ed, with women going through puberty, right? They put on fat. That's puberty, man. Like, that's like men build more muscle than women do during it because of testosterone release, and women put on more fat because they're preparing for childbirth, right? That's evolutionary. That's science, right? Some put on more than others, but that depends on genetics, right? Now, if you're a 29-year-old woman and you hit puberty at 13 and your fat percentage is going up, I'm not going to say that's only genetics. It could be. I don't know all the specific situations. But, you know, it's the same thing as a guy who is putting on, like, if he gained some, because I gained some weight when I was going, or I put on definitely a fat percentage. I used to be 10, then I went to like 17 or 20%, especially after my meds and during puberty time. So, like, puberty plus meds equals really, really chubby noob, right? Like, I was chubby, and I hated it. But at the same time, it's like, well, we know there's a medical issue, anxiety-related, and the pills that I'm taking increases appetite, right? So now I'm just chugging down, like, I'm not kidding you, I'm chugging down, like, 3 giant bowls of cereal a day, because I was starving, right? I couldn't help it. Stress plus having your appetite increase through medication is a terrible combination, believe it or not. So, but what's really fascinating is this stuff has been looked into for a very long time, and it's only been officially recognized in official documentation for the government. It's bizarre to me, right? We've been looking at this forever. I mean, and this is also why I tell people, like, if you have a doctor who just says diet and exercise, or just tells you, like, the most, like, for example, when I had to go in for stress, or when I have friends who have to go in for stress to their doctor, if their doctor just says, do meditation, go home and relax, and I'm like, did they not recommend you to someone who's smarter than them? Because remember, chat, and this is not to take away from general practitioners, but they're named general for a reason. They are like the people on the switchboards. You know how, like, you used to have people moving the plugs on the switchboards to link you to more professional people or people who can answer your questions? That's what general practitioners are. They are links to people who can help you. Doesn't mean they don't have good advice. Doesn't mean they can't help you with the basics. But they are exactly that, and that's known. So when people yell at doctors saying, oh, this doctor couldn't fix my issue, well, if it was your general practitioner, no, they can't most times, in fact. Their job is to bring you to the people that they know, because they make connections, to help you with your issue, right? They do the pre-screening so you don't take up the time of the professionals who are going to have to do their own pre-screening, but if they have to start from the very beginning, the process would take longer out of your day and out of theirs, and you're going to have less treatment because they're going to be spending more time on getting you ready than getting you treated, right? So it's funny how this is just going in now, but it just makes me think, like, we've been doing this for so long, and there's no real point. Don't worry about this. This is not a rant that I'm pissed off at people, right? Like, I'm not upset. It's just it just kind of reaffirms and kind of just makes me look and go. It's funny how first people weren't looking at this, because that doesn't surprise me, because you can have good doctors and bad. You can have good professionals and bad, right? That's the way that it works in every position, right? You can have better and not so great, right? That's how it happens, right? Some people are better speedrunners than me, duh. But I just find it super curious that this is, again, 14 years, because it reminded me of the 20 years of phys ed, where this stuff takes forever, when a lot of it is kind of like, you would think, I wouldn't say no-brainers, because then no one would need therapy, psychotherapy, no one would need any recommendations on meds to take, stuff like this, right? But the fact that it's being officially recognized and enforced, or at least like formalized into Canadian policies here, is kind of It's just weird. I just find it weird. Like, we were taught to do this in high school, for God's sake. I was in high school 15 years ago. They taught a lot about, like, stress eating, and they taught a lot about, you know, factors like poor relationships, eating to get over another addiction, right? Like, I used to, like, you know, how people would chew sunflower seeds to get over their smoking addiction sort of thing. That's kind of like, it's kind of like how you stress eat to escape something else, right? I know, I think, was it one of my uncles? I can't remember. I know someone who used to go to casinos a lot, and they try and reduce the amount of time they gambled by eating at the buffets. But it's like, that just replaces one issue with another, right? So, there are a lot of factors, and I invite you to reflect on that, because it is important for you to recognize that, yeah, a lot of these, there's always been these factors that people have looked at, especially professionals, but it's just interesting how it's being put in now. I don't know. I just kind of wanted to say that. It's bizarre. It's weird. And yeah, there's not much more I wanted to say on that. It's just one of those things where I wake up and I'm like, man, I want to look up a health topic. I see obesity trending and not anything else. And I'm like, well, this could be interesting to read. Then I read it and I go, oh, that's less well, it's interesting in one way, but not in another way. It's just kind of like, it reaffirms that what we've been looking at as fitness trainers and as other professionals in the health field and stuff like that. And even just giving general advice to people if you give good advice to people. Yeah. Yay. I don't know. Enjoy that little tidbit, I guess. Hit home for sure. It hits home for sure. It hits a lot in gaming too. I think there's that stigma where a lot of people are obese and stuff like that in gaming, right? You can't be. I've heard before. You can't be a video gamer. You're not fat. I'm like, wow, that is. Jesus, it's a bit extreme, don't you think? So, let's get to speedrunning, I guess.